My name is Charlotte Harper. I was born in Oregon on a mild, sunny, early spring morning, with sparrows chirping outside the hospital window. 4 minutes after me, my sister, no, technically my twin sister, Caroline Harper, let out her first cry. 4 minutes. Such a small gap that most people would laugh and say, "You're twins, that's basically the same." But to our parents, those 4 minutes marked the line between being loved and being overlooked. Even in my earliest years, I felt the difference. Not with reason, but with glances I didn't receive, hugs I never got, and the way I was brushed aside like an afterthought. Caroline was always chosen first. My mother, Linda, always called her my little angel, while I was just, "Charlotte, please stay quiet while Mummy's busy." Caroline got a pink bike with a flower basket before I even knew how to ride. I got Lily's old bike, worn brakes, and a ripped seat. When we were 6 and joined ballet class, Caroline had a custom-made sparkly white dress. I wore last year's costume, faded and above my ankles. I used to think maybe I was just imagining things, that my parents loved us both the same and I was just too sensitive. But when I was 7, Caroline fell off the backyard slide. Just a light scrape on her knee, but Mom ran out like it was a tragedy, scooped her up, sobbed, and shook like she was falling apart. A week later, she was still telling the story. To friends, neighbors, even the mailman. I fell too, off the tallest apple tree branch in our yard. Hit the ground, dirt all over my face, knees scraped and bleeding. My dad looked through the window and calmly said, "Charlotte's tough. Let her learn how to get through it." No hug, no comfort, just a Band-Aid and a "go wash your hands." I didn't know what a child had to do to be loved equally. I learned not to cry. I learned not to need. And then I learned to hide my feelings, because the weaker I looked, the more I was seen as a burden. I'll never forget one Christmas Eve. Caroline got a 3-story dollhouse with working lights, opening doors, and a spiral staircase. Me, a notebook and a pen. Mom said, I seemed like the writing type. I smiled and thanked her. That night, I lay in the dark, watching the flickering Christmas lights through the window, hugging the notebook tight, not because I loved it, but because I had nothing else to hold. The only person who ever looked at me differently was my grandmother. Her name was Margaret. She lived in Montana and only visited once in a while, but every time she came, it felt like I was standing in sunlight. She always asked if I was hungry, if I was cold, if I had something I wanted to talk about. She called me Little Lottie, the only name that ever made me feel special. One time, when Caroline showed off a new crystal bracelet, I said nothing. Grandma quietly came over and placed a wooden hair clip in my hand, my name carved on the back. "It's not expensive," she whispered, "but it's one of a kind, just like you." Since then, I always wore that hair clip whenever I felt invisible. It reminded me that someone, just one person, once truly saw me. My childhood wasn't a warm collection of sweet memories. It was more like a diary with missing pages, each one a desperate attempt to be noticed, always ignored. And though I used to believe that if I was good enough, tried hard enough, did everything right, they'd see me differently, the truth was, some things were never mine to control. But I refused to let that define me forever. Not anymore. I discovered my gift for writing in 4th grade, when my essay about summer vacation was picked to be read in front of the whole school. It was the first time I got applause, not from my parents, but from classmates and teachers who didn't carry the quiet comparisons of my home. I stood there, cheeks burning, heart racing, looking out at the seats where Caroline sat beside Mom. Mom clapped politely, eyes still on Caroline's new dress as she showed it off to her friend. From then on, I wrote more. I wrote small stories, things I couldn't say out loud, quiet sadnesses and dreams I'd never told anyone. My work was published in the school newsletter and praised by teachers as mature beyond her years. Caroline? She drew a picture of the sun and some trees. Mom stuck it on the fridge and called it raw talent. When I brought home a district-level short story award, Mom just said, "Don't let it make you arrogant." I learned that silence was a language, and in our house it often meant, We don't care. Caroline only had to smile to be called charming. I had to win things to be noticed and still got ignored. Once Caroline and I entered the school science fair, I built a basic water filtration model from recycled materials. Caroline made a colorful clay volcano. It didn't work. When the judges awarded me second place for the whole school, I turned, searching for Mom's eyes in the crowd. She wasn't there. She was with Caroline, taking photos of her next to the leaky volcano. "My little artist," she beamed. I walked home alone, my award wrapped in my coat as it started to rain. My dad, David, was watching the news. I handed him the certificate, hoping for pride. He glanced, nodded mildly. "You're a smart kid," he said. "I know you'll be fine." I didn't need constant praise. I just wanted them to say once, "We see your effort." But that never happened. In high school, I scored a perfect mark on Oregon's state language arts exam, something only 3% of students in the state achieved. The school held a ceremony. I gave a speech in front of the school board. The principal even wrote a letter home. Caroline got a B+ in history that term. Mom showed it off to every neighbor like it was a Nobel Prize. I used to dream that if I worked harder, pushed myself to the edge, they'd eventually have to notice. But I realized for some people, favoritism isn't about reason, it's a choice. And I wasn't the chosen one. Still, I kept going. I woke up early, walked to school in the snow, joined the journalism club, wrote for the school website, and volunteered at the public library. In rare spare moments, I wrote stories, ones where forgotten girls always found their voice. One night, as I was editing an article for a national competition, Caroline knocked on my door. "Charlotte, Mom says you should let me take the car to Ashley's birthday tomorrow. You don't have plans, right?" I said nothing, just looked at her and closed my laptop. She knew that meant yes, and just like always, I stepped aside. But I thought to myself, let her go. I'm preparing for a longer journey. One she can't even imagine. I knew one day the world out there would see me, not as Caroline's sister, but simply as Charlotte Harper. And when that day came, I wouldn't need anyone to say it out loud. I got into the accounting program at Columbia State University in Northern California. The surprise? Caroline chose the same major. When I heard, I froze for a few seconds. I'd never seen her show interest in finance or numbers, but Mom simply said, "It's a good job field. I want both of you to have stability." I didn't say anything. I was used to silence. On move-in day, Caroline had our parents escort her to her dorm. Dad carried every suitcase to the 3rd floor. Mom arranged everything, from pillows to a lavender-scented diffuser. Her room was spacious, sunny, with a view of the campus garden. Me? I signed in alone. My room was half the size, in the basement, damp with peeling paint. It took me nearly a week to clean and hang a few old photos of Grandma to make it feel less cold. My parents paid all of Caroline's tuition and living expenses. She got a brand new laptop, a family credit card, and a bank account that was topped up every month. She posted photos of sushi dinners, new purses, and parties with friends. I was different. I got a partial scholarship and had to cover the rest on my own. I worked as a library assistant at night and cleaned classrooms early in the morning. Every day I woke up at 5 a.m. to sweep 3 floors before my first class. I used to think being a janitor would be shameful. But then I realized, what's shameful about trying to survive? I also signed up to tutor high school students. Each week I taught 3 basic math classes and 2 SAT prep sessions. Afterward, I'd rush back to the dorm to study. Caroline? She'd usually be lounging in the common room with a face mask on, watching movies and complaining about the stress of school. I knew people probably thought I was too intense. But I didn't have a choice. I had no safety net, no backup plan. I couldn't afford to fail. One time, while mopping the 3rd floor of the business building, I overheard Caroline laughing in the hallway. She was bragging to a classmate about a party the night before. "My twin sister? She's probably buried in her books somewhere, maybe cleaning a classroom. I didn't respond. I just tightened my grip on the mop and kept going. Still, I didn't let bitterness take over. I spent my free time reading advanced accounting materials, attending small seminars, and volunteering at Excel workshops for freshmen. Once, when Professor Allen asked a question about financial reporting standards and no one answered, I raised my hand. He nodded with approval, then came up to me after class and said, "Charlotte, you've got what it takes for audit work. I'd like to recommend you for a winter internship at my firm. What do you think?" I was speechless. That night, I called home, excited to share the news with my mom. I was hoping just one congratulatory word would warm my heart, but all she said was, that's nice. Caroline just signed up for a therapeutic yoga class, supposed to be really good for mental health." I stayed silent. I didn't blame them anymore. I just felt lighter, because I finally understood that their validation wasn't necessary for my success. While Caroline drove to school in the car my parents bought, I rode an old bike to work at a grocery store. When she talked about summer in Hawaii with her friends, I spent my break in Professor Allen's storage room, sorting receipts and writing practice reports. I didn't have glamorous check-ins or shiny party videos, but I had something she didn't: control over my own life. And I began to believe, maybe because no one paved the way for me, I had to learn how to build my own. A road that might be rough, but it's mine. I started my 5th semester with a kind of determination I hadn't expected. I had learned how to make the most of every spare minute, every small opportunity. While Caroline spent her time picking outfits for the school's spring festival, I buried myself in the library, studying international financial reporting standards. I knew I had no one backing me, so I couldn't afford to waste a single chance. One Friday afternoon, I went to Professor Allen's office to submit a financial analysis paper. Just as I was about to leave, he called out, "Charlotte, I have a friend at a regional audit firm. They're looking for summer interns. Want me to put your name in?" I froze. "I'd love that, Professor." He nodded. "Then send me your resume and transcript by Monday." I walked out of his office empty-handed, but my heart was full of hope. For the first time, someone offered me a door I didn't have to knock on first. That weekend, I worked on my application non-stop, tweaking every sentence of my cover letter, adjusting every period and comma like it was the key to my future. 3 weeks later, I got a call from Forrest and Wallace. They'd accepted me as a summer intern in their internal accounting department. The internship was unpaid, but for me, the real value was the experience. I woke up at 6 a.m. to reach the office by 8, then rushed back to the dorm for my evening library shift. I took notes on every process, saved every sample file, asked questions about every small detail. And eventually, I was trusted with real technical tasks. I also discovered a special topics course on financial risk management taught by a former IRS analyst. It was meant for senior finance majors, but I took a chance and emailed to ask if I could attend. To my surprise, he replied, "If you commit to every session and do the work seriously, I'll give you a shot." I never missed a class. From there, I got invited to an advanced CPA prep seminar, where I first heard about the prestigious Weston G. Brandt Scholarship, awarded to top senior accounting students. The requirements were tough: an almost perfect GPA, a personal essay, and letters of recommendation from at least 2 professors. Still, I quietly began preparing. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Caroline. I only told myself, each night as I sat alone in my room. Just take one more step. While I was still struggling to finish my essay, Professor Allen called me into his office. He handed me a thick envelope and nodded. "I wrote you a recommendation letter, no need to thank me, just keep going the way you have, steady and strong." I nearly broke down in tears. It was the first time I felt truly seen, not because Caroline was my sister, not because of high scores, but because of who I was. I submitted the application on time. Nearly 2 months later, while I was sweeping in the library, my phone buzzed. A new email popped up with the subject line, "Congratulations, You've been selected for the Weston G. Brant Scholarship. I stood frozen in the hallway, tears rolling down my face. I had done it. That night, I told no one. I bought a small cake, sat by my dorm window, and watched the city lights. I whispered to myself, Charlotte, you don't need anyone to lead the way anymore. You've found your own. I knew this wasn't the finish line, but it was a milestone. Not for others to validate me, but for me to believe. All those quiet years weren't wasted. When the official award packet arrived, I opened a thick envelope from the Scholarship Foundation. Inside was a formal congratulatory letter, a list of benefits, an invitation to the National Recognition Ceremony in Chicago, and one final note that made my heart race. You may bring 2 guests to share this special moment. I sat still for a long time. Outside it was drizzling, each drop tapping the window like echoes from the past. I used to think that if this day ever came, if I was honored on a national stage, I wouldn't need my parents there. I'd stand tall, alone, and smile, knowing I finally felt worthy on my own. But that evening, in my old dorm with its dim yellow light, I picked up the phone. And I called. Mom answered on the 3rd ring. Charlotte, I'm getting ready. Some friends are coming over for dinner. What's going on? I tightened my grip on the phone. Mom, I was selected as one of 6 students nationwide to receive the Weston Brant Scholarship. The ceremony's in Chicago next month. They said I can bring 2 family members. There was silence on the other end. Then Mom said quietly, Oh, congratulations. That sounds important, huh? Then she called out, David, Charlotte said something about a scholarship in Chicago. Dad's voice chimed in from a distance, mixed with the TV. Yeah, she's always been a smart kid. We knew she'd be fine. I didn't know what I was hoping for. Maybe just once. To hear my mother say, I'm proud of you. But she didn't. I ended the call politely. If you can make it, I'd love for you to come. But it's okay if you're busy. I'll check the schedule, she replied. Her tone was no different from talking about a weekend trip to the farmer's market. I hung up. The screen went dark, reflecting my blurry face. Something inside me cracked. Not because they didn't care, but because I still had hope. I thought I'd moved past needing their validation, but deep down, the little girl clutching Grandma's wooden hair clip was still waiting for someone to be proud. I flew to Chicago alone, wearing the square-neck black dress I'd saved up for months to buy. In the grand hotel hall where the ceremony was held, every other scholarship winner had family with them. Beaming parents, relatives hugging, snapping pictures of every moment. I stood alone at the registration desk, wrote my name, and placed a dash in the guests section. The ceremony began. Each name was called and each student stepped on stage, introduced with their impressive achievements. When it was my turn, the announcer's voice rang clear. Charlotte Harper, Columbia State University, a true testament to self-made determination. With a partial scholarship, she worked multiple jobs, secured internships, completed advanced coursework. Charlotte is a symbol of resilience and drive. I walked up to thunderous applause from all directions. The stage lights blinded me, but I still saw the 3rd row on the left. The seats my parents could have filled. I didn't cry. I'd come too far to be shaken by an empty chair. I stood tall, smiled, and accepted the award from the foundation's director. Afterward, while everyone gathered for photos, I quietly stepped outside and called the only person I truly wanted to share this with. My grandmother. She answered on the 1st ring. There you are, my Charlotte. Her voice warm as May sunshine. I've followed every update about the scholarship. You did it. I couldn't hold it back anymore. In the cold wind of Chicago, I cried like the 6-year-old girl who once hugged a Christmas notebook. I wished you were here with me. I'm always with you, in your heart, and listen, don't waste your tears on those who couldn't see your worth. You stepped onto that stage with your own 2 feet. That's what matters most. I nodded, as if she were standing right beside me. Back in my room, I opened the small envelope in my purse. It was a handwritten letter from the foundation director. Charlotte, we didn't choose you just for your grades, but for a life story that truly inspires. Keep walking the way you always have. The big door is open now. Don't hesitate to walk through it. I smiled. I hadn't needed my parents to lead the way. And now? I didn't need them as a backdrop to shine. The Weston G. Brant Award ceremony was held at the Grand Marlowe Convention Center, a 12-story glass building in the heart of downtown Chicago. As I stepped into the grand lobby, everything felt breathtakingly formal. A red carpet stretching from the entrance, white flower arrangements edged with silver lining every podium. The chandelier lights refracted into thousands of sparkles across the students' gowns, and me, in a simple black dress, holding a worn-out clutch, I felt like I had just stepped into another world. I arrived earlier than required and found a seat near the back of the hall, quietly observing. Bright laughter, warm hugs, congratulatory whispers echoed from families accompanying their children. Some were guiding their moms to the photo booth. Others were straightening their dads' ties. I pressed my lips together and looked away. When the program began, the lights dimmed. The host walked to the center of the stage, introducing each honored student of the year. One by one, they stepped up. Some had developed accounting apps for small businesses. Others had won international awards in financial risk analysis. I clapped for every single one, not out of politeness, but because I genuinely understood what it took to get here, what it cost just to make it this far. Then it was my turn. The host smiled, his voice warm and dignified. Charlotte Harper, an outstanding student from Columbia State University. She has proven that strength doesn't need to be handed to you. She earned her own scholarships, paid her own tuition, actively sought out internships, and never stopped improving her skills. Charlotte is living proof of resilience, independence, and unwavering belief in her own future. Applause filled the hall as I stepped onto the stage. My heart pounded, but my hands were steady. I didn't look at the audience. I walked up, accepted the certificate, shook the foundation director's hand, and kept my smile steady. As I turned to pose for the photo, my eyes instinctively scanned the left side of the audience. I froze. Caroline. She was sitting there, in a deep red dress, clutching a small purse, eyes wide with disbelief. Beside her, my parents. My father stared at me as if he couldn't comprehend why I was on stage, and my mother, she sat upright, expressionless, lips pressed tightly like she was holding something back. I didn't know how they got there. I hadn't confirmed anything over the phone. Maybe Caroline had decided to bring them? When the camera flashed for the photo, I turned away. No nod, no smile. I didn't need a picture to remember an uncomfortable moment. After the awards, recruiters and executives from major audit firms began making their rounds, shaking hands, handing out cards, chatting with students. A woman in a teal suit walked toward me and extended her hand. I'm Lucinda Parks, Director of Recruiting at Everin & Co. We were very impressed with your profile. If you're interested, I'd love to invite you to our Manhattan headquarters to talk about a full-time position after graduation. I nodded slightly, accepting her card with both hands. Thank you very much. That's the place I've always dreamed of reaching. Just then, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. My mom. She was walking over, her eyes carrying a hesitation I'd never seen before. Charlotte, I didn't expect the ceremony to be this big, she said. I didn't know you had done so much. I stood tall, my voice calm. Because you never asked. She froze. Caroline stood behind her, her gaze shifting between the two of us. My father jumped in, sounding slightly flustered. You really are something. But why didn't you tell us? If we'd known, we could have helped. I gave a soft smile, not mocking, just a smile of someone who finally understood. I spent my whole childhood trying to be seen by you, but now I don't need that anymore. I turned and walked toward the recruiter area where new doors were waiting to open. For the first time, I carried no hope of being acknowledged. For the first time, they saw who I really was. but it was too late for that to matter. That night, after the ceremony ended, I went back to the hotel alone. The Chicago night air was freezing, but my head burned with heat. I thought I'd feel hurt, empty, regretful, but strangely, I felt nothing, just a deep quiet, as if, after all these years of waiting, I had finally stopped hoping and also stopped resenting. The next morning, while I was packing to return to school, my phone rang. It was Caroline. I hesitated for a few seconds, then picked up. "Where are you?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. "At the hotel, getting ready to head to the airport," I replied. "Can I come see you? Just for a few minutes." I sighed. Part of me wanted to say no, to shut it all out and walk away clean, but another part, the part that had been the little girl standing in Caroline's shadow all her life, whispered, "Hear her out." 30 minutes later, Caroline knocked on my door. She wasn't wearing makeup, just a hoodie and jeans, completely different from her usual polished look. She hovered at the doorway for a long time before finally stepping in. "I don't know where to begin," she said. "Last night, watching you walk across that stage, I realized I've never really understood you." I sat on the edge of the bed, silent. She sat across from me, eyes red. "I always thought I was the one under pressure, but now, Mom and Dad are starting to say I need to be more independent. They're bringing you up as an example. I know that's a good thing, but honestly, I feel like I'm the one being compared now." I raised an eyebrow. Strange. That feeling's familiar. I lived with it for almost 20 years. Caroline lowered her head. "Did you ever wish I'd disappear?" I didn't answer right away. I thought about the days I quietly cleaned classrooms, the nights I ate instant noodles while she was out partying, the times Mom showed off her test scores to neighbors while mine were stuffed in a drawer. Finally, I said softly, "No, I just wanted to be seen." She took a deep breath. "I'm jealous of you, Charlotte. Jealous that you're so capable, that you're strong without needing anyone. I thought you were cold, stuck up. But now I see it. You're not cold. You're just tired of having to be strong for so long." I turned away. If she had said this earlier, maybe I would have cried. But now, it felt like hearing a song I knew too well, too familiar to move me anymore. "Caroline," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "I used to want an apology. I used to want Mom and Dad to stand by me just once. But last night, standing on that stage, I realized I've come far enough not to need that anymore." She said nothing. After a while, she asked quietly, "So now what? Are we still sisters?" I looked her straight in the eyes. "I don't know, maybe. It takes time to understand that being sisters isn't about sharing blood. It's about kindness, respect, and standing by each other, even when no one else does." Caroline nodded, something like remorse flickering in her eyes. When she left the room, I felt lighter, like I had finally put down a suitcase I'd been carrying for years. I didn't need belated praise. I didn't need half-hearted hugs. What I needed? I had already given myself. The freedom to live by my own worth. I moved to New York on a gray day, drizzle veiling the skyscrapers like thin curtains of an unfinished past. The city didn't welcome me with a smile, but I didn't need that. I hadn't come to be comforted. I came to begin. I started work at Everett & Co., a top-tier audit firm with its headquarters on the 37th floor of a glass tower in Midtown. At first, I felt like I was trapped in an endless maze. Deadlines, emails, stacks of paperwork, back-to-back meetings, and the measuring stares of seasoned colleagues. But I wasn't afraid. I was used to fighting alone. Every morning I woke up at 5:30, made a cup of black coffee, and stepped into the packed subway with earbuds in and files in hand. In a world where everyone seemed to be chasing something, power, money, fame, I chased only one thing: the freedom to be true to myself. My tiny apartment on the Upper West Side was all I could afford. One bedroom, a living space that doubled as a kitchen, and a window facing the brick wall of the building next door. No balcony, no skyline view, but it had something I always carried with me: inner peace. Mom called occasionally, usually on weekends. The conversations never lasted more than 3 minutes. "Are you eating well?" "Yeah, I'm fine." "Work wearing you out?" "It's a lot, but I'm used to it." "Caroline's thinking about taking another certification. I told her to follow her sister's lead." I replied with a short okay. No blame, no expectations. We were more polite acquaintances than a family that once lived under the same roof. Caroline messaged me a few times too, sending pictures of herself attending seminars and saying she was looking for a full-time job at a financial consulting firm. Her messages no longer carried that show-off tone. They felt cautious, as if she was trying to find balance in a world that had begun asking her to grow up. I didn't hate them. I just no longer belonged to their world. In New York, I had my own rhythm. After work, I took an advanced financial data analysis course. On weekends, I'd stop by a used bookstore on 84th Street, pick up a novel, and sit for hours by a small window corner. One time, while reading The Bell Jar, I received an email from the project director. They wanted me to lead the audit team for a new client. I sat still for a moment after reading it. 3 years ago, I was mopping classroom floors. Now, I was about to lead an audit team for a multi-million-dollar company. That night, I came home, opened my window, and looked at the night sky blanketed in artificial light. New York never sleeps and never waits. But I had caught up. And I knew I was living the life that little girl once dreamed of, even when no one believed she could. A week later, my mom called again. "Charlotte, are you coming home for Thanksgiving?" I looked at my calendar. Thanksgiving landed right during the week I'd be presenting audit results to the client's board. "No, I'm busy. I have a major project to prepare for." "Oh, I see." Her voice softened, and she hung up quicker than usual. I didn't feel guilty. I felt relieved, because for once, I chose my work, my dreams, and myself over fulfilling a role someone else had scripted for me. Family, to me, had become scattered memories, not because I gave up, but because I stopped chasing. I don't know where the future will take me, but I do know this: whatever happens, I'll no longer wait for anyone's approval to know I'm enough. At the end of my first year at Everett & Co., I was promoted to associate. Not a giant leap by many standards, but to me it was a clear milestone. I was no longer the girl trying to get by, but someone actively building her own future. I started saving, not for luxury bags or vacations, but to buy something more valuable: choices. I wanted the freedom to pivot someday, to pursue an MBA, switch to financial analysis, or start a business, without needing anyone's permission. I also began to open up, in my own way. I joined a mentoring group for senior year accounting students, exactly what I had once wished I had. Once a month, I'd sit with young students and talk about my uneven journey, the late nights, the silent failures no one knew about, and the moments I wanted to quit but pushed through anyway. One of them once asked me, "Did you ever feel sad that your family didn't support you?" I didn't answer right away. I looked out the window, where the golden sunset shimmered across the Hudson River. "Yes," I said. But I realized, if you wait for others to fill your glass, you'll stay thirsty forever. I chose to fill my own. I used to live hoping to be seen. Now, I live, so I'll never look back with regret. Caroline still texts sometimes, her tone no longer arrogant, no longer competitive. She told me she found a job at a small firm in our hometown and was thinking about enrolling in a project management course. Once, she wrote, "I'm still not where you are, but now I get why you're so strong. I'm trying to learn that too." I didn't reply to that message, but inside something softened. Not because she finally acknowledged it, but because I no longer needed to win. Sometimes, the moment you stop competing is when you've truly won. I still get a few calls from Mom each month. The calls no longer feel like obligations. Some days she talks about small things. the roses blooming in the backyard, a new pie recipe she learned from her senior group. She no longer asks about work, not because she doesn't care, but because I no longer need her to. Sometimes I wonder, if things had been different back then, if my parents had shared love more evenly, if Caroline hadn't been so shielded, if I hadn't been labeled the one who can handle herself, would I still be this strong? I don't know. And maybe I don't need to know anymore. One Saturday afternoon, I passed through Bryant Park and saw two sisters playing tag. The older one slowed down so the younger could catch up, and when they both fell onto the grass, they burst out laughing without a care in the world. My heart tightened, not from envy, but because I had finally let go of wanting to live like that. It took me years to understand. Not everyone born into your family will be your support system. But because of that, I learned to choose the people who are. My coworkers, my students, the ones who trust me unconditionally. I'd built my own kind of family, not from blood, but from respect and genuine connection. In that world, I wasn't the extra. I didn't have to be exceptional just to be heard. I was simply me. And that was enough. When I step off the subway each morning, sunlight hitting the edge of my coat, I don't need anyone to remind me I'm on the right path. Each steady footstep on the city pavement whispers that to me. My third fall in New York passed in a blur of sunshine and busyness. I had just completed the most complex audit of my career for a global real estate firm. The results exceeded expectations, and my direct supervisor recommended me for a senior associate position. No party, no fireworks, just a late evening, setting my laptop down on the kitchen counter, flipping on the kettle, and smiling to myself. I didn't need applause, because I knew, without a doubt, I had done it. Every now and then, I get cards from Caroline. Birthday, Christmas, or just thinking of you. She's now living in Seattle working at a fintech startup. Her messages carry more sincerity now, and I've learned to reply, neither too close nor too distant. My relationship with my parents remains distant. Mom still calls whenever there's something noteworthy about Caroline, but it happens far less. Our conversations are now confined to general questions like, how's work? Or, is it snowing in New York yet? And I only answer just enough. No anger, no desire to fix what's long been lost. Once, Mom texted, "Sweetheart, sometimes I think if we'd talked more back then, maybe things would have turned out differently." I read it but didn't respond, because I no longer need what-ifs. I've lived through them, walked through them, and kept going. That spring, I accepted an invitation to be the keynote speaker at a major conference on women in finance. Standing before hundreds of people, I shared my journey. Not sugar-coated, not edited. I spoke about the girl who once mopped hallways in college at dawn, who washed mugs in the library to buy textbooks, and who studied alone at night because no one reminded her she deserved a chance. At the end of my speech, I said, "We don't need anyone else to validate our worth. We can do that ourselves. Through every small action, every time we stand up again, and every time we choose ourselves instead of pleasing others." As I stepped off the stage, an older woman approached me and held my hand. "Thank you for saying what so many of us never dared to admit, that sometimes the absence of family support doesn't weaken us, it makes us stronger than we ever imagined." I nodded, heartwarming in a way no words could fully explain. That night, I walked across the Brooklyn Bridge, the lights reflecting on the water like strands of golden thread. The city was still bustling, still in motion, but inside me, there was a rare stillness. It took me years to understand this. Blood doesn't guarantee support. Family isn't just where we're born. It's where someone genuinely wants to see us grow. And sometimes, that place isn't the home we grew up in, but the relationships we choose to keep. The ones who walk beside us, the ones who believe in us, and even ourselves. I don't blame my family. Not anymore. They lived the way they knew, loved the way they could. But I've also learned that I have the right to reject love that's hollow, without heart. I choose to love myself. The girl who once sat by the dorm window with a small cake to celebrate her scholarship. The woman now standing strong on her own, without needing anyone to lead the way. I don't live for recognition. I live so I'll never have to bow my head to myself. And in that, Charlotte Harper is no longer the daughter who can handle herself. She's the one who rewrote the meaning of worth, of family, and of love, through lived experience, not borrowed definitions. Looking back, I don't regret the years behind me, because they shaped the person I am today. Not perfect, but real. And that, to me, is enough to be happy. Charlotte's story proves that not everyone born into the same family becomes each other's source of strength. Sometimes the absence of love becomes the drive to stand tall and build a life on your own terms. Charlotte chose to love herself, to let go of old expectations, and to find true worth not in others' validation, but in her own growth. In a world full of pressure, choosing to live for yourself is the boldest, most beautiful thing of all. What do you think of Charlotte's choice? Was she too firm? Or was that the only way to truly find herself? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about life, family, and finding your voice. I spent 2.5 years planning my dream wedding. Every detail was carefully thought out. From the romantic beachfront venue in Charleston, South Carolina, to the exquisite menu featuring all my favorite dishes. Andrew, my fiancé, and I had been in love for nearly 4 years, and I had always believed we would have a happy marriage. Everything seemed perfect, except for one major issue. Andrew's parents had never accepted me. His mother, Vivian, always carried herself with an air of elegance and coldness. The first time we met, she scanned me from head to toe, as if evaluating whether I was worthy of joining their family. His father, William, was quieter but always distant. He spent most of his time bragging about his investments and the exclusive clubs he was a member of. I didn't come from a prestigious family. My parents were hardworking people, and I was proud of that. I had no interest in elite circles, extravagant dinners, or luxury trips meant for showing off. I loved Andrew for who he was, not for his family or wealth. But to Vivian and William, that didn't matter. They always believed their son could find someone better. Andrew used to tell me not to worry. They'll come around. He reassured me every time I expressed my concerns, but I knew it was an empty promise. Over the years, they had never changed the way they saw me, and I was beginning to realize that I wasn't just marrying Andrew. I was stepping into a family that never wanted me there. Still, I tried. We sent out invitations, picked out wedding flowers, tried on dresses, and sampled cakes. I spent hours meticulously planning every detail of our big day, while Vivian remained indifferent to everything I did. But that didn't stop me from looking forward to the moment I would officially become Andrew's wife. And then, just 1 week before the wedding, everything fell apart. I still remember that afternoon vividly, exactly 1 week before our wedding, when Andrew showed up with a slightly forced smile. "My parents just planned a trip," he said, avoiding my gaze. I set my teacup down, frowning slightly. "Now?" "Yeah, just a short getaway to Palm Beach. They said it's a family tradition. A little vacation before someone gets married." I had never heard him mention this tradition before, and if it was so important, why hadn't they brought it up earlier? "Why so last minute?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Andrew shrugged. "They just want to spend some time with me before everything changes. You know, like parents wanting one last moment with their son before he becomes a married man." It sounded reasonable, but something felt off. I stared at him, searching for any sign of hesitation, and just as I feared, Andrew avoided my eyes. "Can I come?" I asked, half joking. He laughed, but it wasn't genuine. "You know my mom wouldn't like that." A wave of coldness washed over me. Of course, Vivian would never allow me to come. In her eyes, I had never been part of their family. "How long?" I asked. 4 days. Leaving Thursday, back on Sunday. I clenched my hands under the table. 4 days, right before the wedding? Strange. But I didn't want to turn it into an argument, especially since Andrew already seemed set on going. I smiled and nodded. "Then go, but come back soon." Andrew kissed my forehead, as if reassuring me, then quickly left. A few days later, he left for the trip, and by Saturday night, everything collapsed. I was sitting on my couch, reviewing the guest list one last time, when I got a call from Sophie, my best friend. "Joe," her voice was tense. "He's here." I frowned. "Who?" "Andrew." My heart skipped a beat. "What? What do you mean?" "I'm at the Royal Lounge, a high-end bar in downtown Palm Beach. I swear, Andrew is here, and you won't believe who he's with." My throat went dry. "Who?" "His parents and a girl. Younger than you, blonde, looks rich and stuck up." Heat spread through my body. "Are you sure it's him?" "I saw him with my own eyes, Joe. Not only that, but all three of them, Vivian, William, and that girl, are laughing and chatting with Andrew like they're a perfect family. And he doesn't look uncomfortable or anything." The world around me blurred. "Did you see them doing anything inappropriate?" I asked, my voice tight. Sophie hesitated. Andrew put his hand on her waist as they walked into the VIP section. I gripped my phone tightly. "Joe?" Sophie's voice was filled with concern. "I'm here. Do you want me to do anything? Take pictures, record them, confront him?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. If Sophie had seen them, chances were other people had too. If this was really what I thought it was, I needed proof. "I need evidence," I whispered. "Take pictures, videos, anything you can." "I got it," Sophie said immediately. "I'll do it now." I sat frozen on the couch, staring at my phone as if it could somehow give me a reasonable explanation. So this was the real reason for the sudden trip. Not to spend time with their son before the wedding, but to introduce him to a new candidate, a girl they deemed more suitable than me. Who was she? An old acquaintance? A family friend? Or someone they had deliberately set him up with? I closed my eyes, trying to suppress the anger rising inside me. If this was real, if Andrew was truly involved in this, then it wasn't just my wedding that was over. My entire life was about to change forever. I didn't sleep at all that night. My phone sat on the table, filled with Sophie's messages, along with a few hastily taken photos. The quality wasn't crystal clear, but it was enough to recognize Andrew and that girl sitting close together, laughing like they had known each other for ages. In another photo, Vivian was resting her hand affectionately on the girl's shoulder, as if she had already welcomed her into the family. I couldn't believe it. But anger wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed solid, undeniable proof. The next morning, I called Mark Reynolds, a private investigator Sophie had once hired when her sister suspected she was being scammed in business. He picked up on the first ring, his voice calm and professional. "I need to investigate someone," I said bluntly. Mark wasn't surprised. "Tell me what you know, and I'll take care of the rest." I sent him the location of the bar, the hotel where Andrew and his family were staying, and the photos Sophie had taken. I wanted to know who that girl was, why she was with Andrew and his family, and most importantly, what they had been doing throughout the trip. Mark promised to update me as soon as he had anything. 48 hours passed in absolute tension. I didn't text or call Andrew. I waited. And then, on Tuesday morning, my phone rang. "Mark, I have information." An hour later, I sat in my usual cafe with Mark, my stomach in knots. He placed a folder in front of me, along with a USB drive. "I think you'll want to see for yourself." I opened the folder. The first page contained the personal details of the girl. Her name was Lauren Davis, 26 years old, the daughter of a wealthy businessman in Florida. Private school education, involved in multiple social events. The kind of person Vivian and William would undoubtedly consider worthy of their family. I turned to the next page. The first image. Andrew and Lauren sitting close together at an upscale restaurant. Far too intimate to be dismissed as coincidence. The second image. Vivian talking to Lauren at the bar, with William nodding along as if agreeing to a plan. The third image. Andrew and Lauren walking out of a jewelry store together. My stomach twisted. There's more, Mark said, sliding the USB toward me. I have a few video clips, especially this one. He opened his laptop, plugged in the USB, and pressed play. On the screen, Vivian and Lauren sat in the hotel bar, cocktails in hand, their voices clear through the hidden microphone Mark had used. Vivian leaned toward Lauren, speaking with absolute confidence. "As long as you do your part well, I'll handle the rest. Josephine was a mistake. She doesn't belong in this family. We just need to make Andrew see that." Lauren let out a soft laugh. "I have a feeling he already has." I felt my entire body freeze. Mark paused the video, looking at me with sympathy. "Vivian and William didn't just take Andrew on a trip. They orchestrated this. Lauren wasn't a coincidence. They planned for her to replace you." My heart turned cold. I didn't know what I had expected. Maybe an explanation, a possibility that this was all a misunderstanding. But no, everything was crystal clear. Andrew hadn't just been led into this. He had willingly participated. I stared at the laptop screen. This wasn't just about a trip. This was a carefully planned betrayal. I clenched my fists. "If you want to dig deeper," Mark offered, "I can." I shook my head, taking a deep breath. "No need, I have enough. Enough to know I could never marry Andrew. Enough to realize this family would never accept me. And most importantly, enough to make sure they knew I wouldn't quietly disappear. Their game was over. They just didn't know it yet." I didn't have to wait long. Andrew returned on Tuesday night, a day later than planned, and I knew why. He didn't want to face me. When he stepped into my apartment, the air immediately grew heavy. He lingered near the door, as if ready to leave at any moment. "Josephine," he said, his voice tense. "We need to talk." I nodded calmly, already knowing exactly what was coming. I pulled out a chair, motioning for him to sit. Andrew hesitated before lowering himself onto the seat across from me, his eyes avoiding mine. "I'm listening," I said, keeping my tone light enough not to alarm him, but sharp enough to make him uneasy. He exhaled, rubbing his hands together. "I think we should take a break." I stared at him. "A break?" Andrew nodded, still avoiding my gaze. "I just think maybe we need to take some time to think. Everything is moving so fast, and I'm not sure if this is the right decision." I stayed silent for a few seconds. Then I smiled. "How interesting," I said, reaching for a folder on the table and placing it in front of him. "Because I just got some information about your trip." Andrew's entire body tensed. "Take a look." I gestured. He opened the folder. The first image, Andrew and Lauren at the restaurant, sitting so close their shoulders nearly touched. The second image, Vivian smiling at Lauren in the bar, an expression full of meaning. The third image, Andrew and Lauren leaving a jewelry store together. I watched as horror slowly spread across his face while he flipped through the pages, eventually reaching the last section. A transcript of text messages Mark had retrieved from Lauren's phone. Messages from Vivian. "Just spend time with him. We'll take care of the rest." Andrew swallowed hard, flipping to the final page. A screenshot from the video at the bar where his mother promised Lauren that this wedding would never happen. I crossed my arms, watching him. "Do you have anything to say?" I asked, my voice steady. Andrew set the folder down, his hands shaking. "Josephine, I can explain." I raised an eyebrow. "Explain? Explain how your mother arranged a meeting with another woman right before our wedding? Or explain how you let it happen so easily?" His hands clenched into fists, his expression flustered. "I didn't do anything on purpose," he blurted out. "I just wanted to keep the peace. I didn't want to make my mother angry. I didn't want to cause trouble." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Keep the peace?" I repeated, my gaze sharp. "You think letting your family sabotage your own wedding is keeping the peace?" Andrew fell silent. And at that moment, the door swung open. Vivian walked in as if she owned the place, followed closely by William. In her hand was a notebook, probably my wedding planner, something that no longer meant anything. "Can we talk like adults?" Vivian said, her voice carrying its usual authority. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. "Oh, you want to talk? Great. I have all evening." She glanced at the folder on the table, her eyes narrowing slightly. "This is ridiculous. Josephine, you're overreacting." I let out a light laugh. "Overreacting? You mean I'm not supposed to react when my fiancé's mother hires another woman to replace me right before my wedding?" William spoke coldly. "We only want what's best for Andrew. We don't think you're the right long-term choice." A cold fury spread through me. I turned to Andrew. "Did you know about this?" He was silent for too long. And that said everything. I took a deep breath, locking eyes with Vivian. "You think you get to choose your son's wife?" She gave a small, dismissive smile. "I'm just making sure my son doesn't make a mistake." My phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at it. A message from Sophie. "Lauren is still in Palm Beach. She just bragged to her friends that Andrew's family made sure this wedding would never happen." I set my phone down and looked directly at Vivian. "Well, I have good news for you," I said, my voice calm but carrying the weight of a verdict. "You got what you wanted." I stood up, grabbed the folder and slid it toward Andrew. "This wedding is off." Andrew's face went pale. "Josephine!" "I'm done, Andrew." I held his gaze for a long moment, letting my words sink in. "I'm not marrying someone who can't stand up for himself. I'm not marrying into a family I'll have to fight against for the rest of my life." I turned to Vivian and William. "Congratulations, Andrew is free of me. But let's see if anyone actually wants to be a part of a family like this." And with that, I walked out of my own apartment, leaving Andrew, Vivian, and William standing there in silence. I slammed the door behind me, taking a deep breath, but the air felt thick. I was shaking, but not from sadness. There were no more tears, no more pain. Only a quiet, simmering rage, pulsing through every part of me. I couldn't stop here. I needed to know the full truth. I grabbed my phone and dialed Sophie. She answered on the first ring. "You okay, Joe?" "I'm fine," I said firmly. "But I need to know more. Lauren, what else did she say?" Sophie hesitated for a second, then sighed. "Joe, you won't believe this." "Try me." "Last night, Lauren was bragging to her friends that Vivian paid her to go on this trip. And I don't just mean covering flights and hotels. There was cash, gifts, and a promise of a secure future if she did her part right." I felt my chest tighten. Her part? "Yeah. She said Vivian promised that if she could get Andrew interested, she'd make sure Lauren had a place in the family. Basically, they wanted to swap you out for her." I clenched my jaw. Everything became painfully clear. This wasn't just a casual trip. This wasn't just some new friend Andrew happened to meet. This had been orchestrated from the start. "You're sure about this, Sophie?" "Joe, I recorded it." I went still for a few seconds. She continued. "I left my phone on the table when Lauren was talking. I got her voice, crystal clear, talking about how Vivian promised to push you aside. I put my phone on speaker, opened my laptop, and downloaded the recording from Sophie. Pressing play, Lauren's voice came through, clear, undeniable. "Vivian told me Andrew wouldn't marry Josephine. She said I just had to make him hesitate a little. Once the wedding was called off, she'd take care of the rest." Silence. I let out a quiet laugh, but inside I was burning. I stopped the recording and took a deep breath. "I think," I said slowly, "it's time Andrew heard this. I didn't warn him before showing up at his place. I didn't want to give him time to prepare a lie." When the door opened, Andrew froze at the sight of me. "Joe," he frowned. "I thought we were done talking." I gave a cold smile and pulled out my phone. "Oh no, we're not done, Andrew." I pressed play. Lauren's voice echoed through his apartment. "Just had to make him hesitate a little. Once the wedding was called off, she'd take care of the rest." Andrew's face went from pale to deep red. What is this?" he stammered. Proof? I slipped my phone back into my pocket. Were you going to tell me your mother paid Lauren to seduce you? Or were you just going to stay quiet, like every other time? Andrew pressed his lips together but said nothing. I stepped into the house, leaving the door wide open behind me. And you know what's funny? I tilted my head. The whole world is about to find out about this. I pulled out a new folder and slammed it onto the table. This is everything: photos, messages, payment receipts from your mother to Lauren. I crossed my arms. So, Andrew, do you have anything left to say? He swallowed hard. Joe, I didn't know. I laughed. You didn't know? You didn't think it was suspicious when Lauren conveniently showed up right before our wedding? You didn't realize your mother was manipulating you? He closed his eyes, rubbing his forehead. Oh, I didn't want to disappoint her, he muttered. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So you didn't care about hurting me as long as your mother was happy? I crossed my arms tighter. He stayed silent. And that was my answer. I took a step back, as if I was finally seeing him clearly for the first time. You never stood by me, I said slowly. You let them do this, and you didn't stop them. Andrew didn't argue. I shook my head and picked up the folder. Fine, I said, a faint cold smile on my lips. If you won't pick a side, I'll pick for you. Andrew frowned. What does that mean? I turned toward the door, glancing at him one last time. It means, I said, my voice sharp, your mother is about to regret messing with me. And with that, I walked out, leaving Andrew drowning in his own silence. I didn't just walk away quietly. If Vivian thought she could manipulate everything to her liking without consequences, she was wrong. I spent the entire night planning, and the next morning I sent a group message to Andrew, Vivian, William, and Lauren. We need an emergency meeting at the wedding venue at 2 p.m. If you want to clear things up before it's too late, be there. I didn't explain further. I wanted them to worry, to ask themselves 1,000 questions. And I knew for sure that Vivian wouldn't be able to resist an invitation like this. The wedding venue was supposed to be the place where I exchanged vows with Andrew. But today, it was just a stage where I would expose everything they had done. Vivian and William arrived first, walking in with their usual air of superiority, as if they were still in control. Lauren followed shortly after, her wavy blonde hair perfectly styled, her eyes glinting with smug confidence. And then Andrew walked in. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. But I didn't care anymore. I didn't waste time. Once they were all seated, I turned on the projector. The first image appeared on the screen, Vivian sitting at the hotel bar in Palm Beach, speaking to Lauren. As long as you do your part well, I'll handle the rest. Vivian stiffened. William leaned back in his chair, his face hardening. Andrew leaned forward slightly, his eyes locked on the screen. The next image, Lauren and Andrew outside a jewelry store, laughing and talking closely. Lauren let out a small laugh, crossing her legs, her voice full of defiance. So what? You're just trying to turn this into some unnecessary scandal? I raised an eyebrow and pressed play on the next video clip. On the screen, Lauren's voice rang out, chillingly clear. Vivian told me Andrew wouldn't marry Josephine. She said I just had to make him hesitate a little. Once the wedding was called off, she'd take care of the rest. Silence filled the room. Lauren froze, but tried to maintain her composure. You have no right to invade my privacy. I laughed, shaking my head. Privacy? You tried to destroy my wedding, and now you want to talk about privacy? Andrew lowered his head, rubbing his forehead. I turned to him. Did you know about this? He didn't answer immediately, and that alone was an answer. Vivian still wasn't ready to back down. Josephine, don't be so emotional. We were simply introducing Andrew to better options. What's so wrong about that? I clenched my fists, locking eyes with her. What's wrong is that you don't get to make that decision for your son. What's wrong is that you can't respect his choices. And most importantly, You thought I would just sit back and tolerate it. William finally spoke, his voice low and firm. We were only thinking about Andrew's long-term future. Andrew lifted his head, looking at his father. Long-term future? His voice wavered. By arranging for me to betray the woman I was supposed to marry? Vivian's grip tightened on the straps of her purse, but she said nothing. I turned to Andrew, my voice calm but sharp. Do you see it now, Andrew? This is how they treat you. Like a puppet, a piece on a chessboard for them to move however they please. Andrew swallowed hard, but still didn't say a word in my defense. Lauren clicked her tongue, then let out a quiet chuckle. Well, either way, you're not really a problem anymore. She shrugged. Andrew's already made his choice. I gave her a small, knowing smile and nodded. You're right. I turned to Andrew, holding his gaze for a few seconds. You had so many chances to stand by me, I said, my voice void of anger, filled only with pure disappointment. And you never did. Andrew opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but no words came out. I shut my laptop and picked up my bag. Then go ahead and do what you do best, Andrew, I said, my voice light but weighted with meaning. Stay silent and let your mother decide for you. And with that, I walked out of the room without looking back. No more wedding, no more Andrew, no more toxic family. And for the first time in months, I felt freer than ever. I left the wedding venue without a single glance back. No final words, no further explanations. Everything was already crystal clear. I didn't need to hear any more justifications. What I had done wasn't just canceling a wedding. I had freed myself from a toxic family, a man who never had the courage to stand up for me, and a future I had almost been trapped in. A few hours later, I sat in my apartment, reading messages from friends and family, people who had just heard that the wedding was off. Some were shocked, some were furious on my behalf, but what surprised me most was that nearly everyone said I had made the right decision. And when I opened Instagram, I knew immediately that the drama wasn't over. Lauren, just as I had expected, couldn't keep quiet. She posted a selfie at a luxury bar holding a glass of wine, with a caption dripping with arrogance. Not everyone is meant for high society. Some people simply don't meet the standards. In the comments, people from Andrew's social circle were already asking questions, trying to figure out what had happened. Some defended me, some tried to stay neutral, but regardless of what they said, the rumors had already spread. I sighed, but not out of sadness, just sheer exhaustion at their shamelessness. Within a week, Andrew's family's reputation collapsed in a way they never saw coming. The high-profile wedding guests, the influential business and social figures, began to distance themselves from Vivian and William as the truth unraveled. Turns out, not everyone approved of a family that treated marriage like a business transaction. Some of Andrew's closest friends even cut ties with him, not because they were particularly loyal to me, but because they didn't want to associate with a man who had no backbone, someone who let his mother dictate his life. Vivian desperately tried to regain control of the situation. She hosted a private event to show that their family was still intact, but no one cared anymore. No one wanted to be labeled as someone who supported a staged, manipulative scheme to break up a wedding. And Lauren? She lasted exactly 3 weeks with Andrew. 3 weeks. At first, she was by his side constantly, enjoying the attention from those curious about the scandal. But when she realized Andrew had no control over his family's finances, when she understood there was no extravagant wedding, no elite status to claim, she left without a word. Andrew was left alone, with a disgraced family and a life that was no longer his to control. And me? I didn't spend time crying over what was lost because I lost nothing at all. Instead, on the day I was supposed to walk down the aisle, I did something I never thought I would. I threw a non-wedding party. My friends showed up in full force, bringing wine, cake, and glamorous outfits as if we were attending the most extravagant celebration. There were no tears, no regrets, Just laughter, music, and an overwhelming sense of freedom. I wore a deep blue silk dress, the one I had chosen to replace my wedding gown, and stood in the middle of my living room, a glass of wine in hand. Sophie looked at me and smiled. "How does it feel?" I thought for a moment, then grinned wider than ever. "I've never felt better." And that wasn't a lie. I had escaped a disastrous marriage before it even began. I no longer had to fight for a family that would never respect me. I no longer had to be with a man who lacked the courage to stand up for his own love. I lost nothing. In fact, I had just reclaimed everything. As I cut into the wedding cake, the only thing left from what had been planned. I didn't feel heartache or bitterness. I laughed, scooped a bite with my fork, and savored it. "Sweeter than any wedding," I murmured. And as the music played, as I danced with my friends under the glittering lights, I realized the most important thing of all. I had won. Not because I had gotten revenge on Vivian or humiliated Lauren, not because Andrew was left in the loneliness he deserved, but because I had chosen myself. And that was the greatest victory of my life. Josephine's story is not just a lesson in love and betrayal, it's proof of the power of knowing your worth. In real life, many people stay trapped in toxic relationships, afraid of being alone or unwilling to walk away after investing so much time and emotion. But the most important thing isn't holding on to someone who doesn't deserve you. It's having the courage to let go when necessary. Sometimes, losing what you thought you needed is exactly how you find yourself in a better future. What do you think about Josephine's story? If you were in her shoes, what would you have done? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more compelling stories about family, love, and life's valuable lessons.